Welcome back to Deep Thoughts, ladies and gentlemen. As I pull open this Padron my father sent me for Christmas. Should be the perfect stick for this show. So this is going to be one of those shows where no one will watch it. But I had this little gem come to me when I was younger, especially. Doesn't really matter how old you are. If you're still playing this game, if you're still in this trap that I'm going to expose, it would have changed my life. It takes some working, and I'm still working on it. We're going to talk about it. But what this has to do with is you being okay with being you. And it's way deeper than that little statement. It's about the idea that you have these skills. Whatever skills you have. When you start out, you're not sure what you're going to be good at. Then you hunker down and you get good at some stuff. Sometimes the first things that you get good at are just serendipitous. You just get good at them. It was just something you picked up when you were a kid. And, you never really even noticed it. I mean, you kind of noticed it, but whatever, it's your thing. And as you get older, you start to hunker down. You go to school, you get trained in something, or you just fall in love with something and you get good at it. Could just be your personality is really likable. You're a good conversationalist. You're a good negotiator. You mediate intense situations and get everyone calmed down. You're good at something. You're good at a lot of things. Now, as you share who you are with people, and there's only a few moments when this really happens, it can be very daunting to share who you are confidently without seeming egotistical or narcissistic. And that is what we're going to talk about. Because here is the rub. And I have alluded to this way back in season 1 when I did the ego episode. But I've had a lot more time to think about it, and I've tested some theories. I failed, I think, recently to pull this off. And so I'm rethinking this thing. So I'm going to share with you my experience, both historically and recently, to see if we can come up with sort of a decent methodology, because it is a very, very delicate situation. Let me give you an example. First, I'm going to start with the fictitious one. You're really good at something. Someone is either your potential lover or your potential employer. Now, with the companionship situation, it just depends on the other person. If you're doing somehow one of these, like, what do they call it, like that flash dating thing where you go to a restaurant. I've heard friends of mine do this, and it was in movie 43. It's pretty funny, superheroes doing it at a restaurant. The whole thing is that you're rapid firing who you are, what you like to somebody else, and to see if they're interested in you. But that's not typically the way it works, right? Typically, when you meet someone, you got some time. You got some real estate in the economy of time to let somebody know who you are. And so you can take your time. Let them know slowly how you are, or who you are, and what your capabilities are. Let them see who you are by example. That's the best way to do it. And that's why typically that's the most successful methodologies that we use when we want to let somebody know who we are. Now, our friends are sort of on the periphery, because whether they ever figure out what you do, who cares? I mean, if they like you, they like you. It doesn't matter what you do. But in a relationship, you're going to share space. You're going to share all your smells. You're going to share all your preferences in life. So you kind of have to convey that information. But the catch is when you are in an employment situation or in a partnership situation or any type of professional advisory situation where they have yet to pull you on board. Now, that's usually split up into 2 categories. And I have experimented successfully and unsuccessfully the last probably, I guess, let me think back. I had a little gig in 2019 when it went really well. I approached these two guys. You heard me mention them a couple times. Two kids in their 20s, man, they're freaking geniuses. They're also hard workers. And we just met and we talked stuff over. And I said, look, man, I'm only here because I heard about your company. I read about it. They did I think they put a job application in to like somewhere. But that never makes me go and apply for a job. I'm always just on for the adventure, man. I'm like, can I help two entrepreneurs any way I can? And if they want to compensate me, that's great. My rule about compensation in that scenario is I have to earn my keep. And I don't know that I actually did, but they were so adamant about giving me some money. It was really awesome. They're two great guys. In that case, we got together. We got the chance to work for about 4 months together. And they wanted me there in the office every morning. And I worked a full day. And it was the first time I had done that probably since around 2015, where I took a gig just right after I got on my game company. I was like, I just need to do something. But I didn't have like really a person breathing down my neck in that situation. So it'd probably been up almost 20 years. And so it was a blast. They trusted me that I wasn't telling them lies. They found out I wasn't telling them lies, and it was just great. Okay. But over the last, since then, and even in 2016, I tried this out. Find these companies. I try to go in. And there's cultural issues. But recently I found a company that really could have used my assistance, and it's a company I'm a fan of. And I went in and I'm sitting there thinking, okay, I'm sort of past this phase, and this is all aimed at you, okay? Think about yourself as I'm telling you this story. Don't worry about my specifics. I'm trying to tell these people how I can help them. Now, the problem with this recent group is that they don't have any clue what they're doing at this particular level. They know what they're doing in their business, but they're inventing a brand new position they've never had. They said they hired a couple people in that position, but I don't think they have. I mean, it's not what I was interviewing for because they just couldn't describe the role. It was really sad. But this is going to come back to just who you are as a person around anyone and everyone, but especially in the mirror. And that's where it becomes really powerful. It's powerful everywhere. Now, this company just happened to be centered in the Bay Area, in an old town I used to live in for about 9 years. And there is a certain cultural problem with that area of the world. The Bay Area is split about, I think, 80-20. 80% of them are very insecure nerds who absolutely loathe anyone in the room who's chill, who's got lots of talent. It's just the way it is. When I worked in the database industry, I was always kind of, I had to become a monster of that industry to get respect, meaning like way stronger than normal. So it was like, well, whatever, dude, I don't need you. I'm the head of this department. I'm the head of this other department. I got my own product on the side. I'm selling to Fortune 1000 companies. I don't care about your opinion. You're not investing in yourself. You don't know this product. And so then they would kind of cower down out of sheer brute force. But that's because I already snuck in the door at the lower level, cowering down to them, right? But when I got in the game industry, it's completely different. When I got to EA, it was like, come on in, man. What all can you do? And you could just tell them everything that you can do. And they were like, great. Hey, guess what? We're going to give you like a bunch of stuff you've never done before that we think you can do. We're going to push you so far beyond where you think you can go. And they did. That's why I started doing, music for video games. A guy screwed up a bunch of soundtracks. We were under deadline. I was making a bunch of personal music on the side everybody was listening to. And so they just pointed it at me and said, go home and make this music. Can you do it for $2,000 for 2 weeks? I said, yeah, sure. It was free, basically, for them. That's all the money we had in the bank. So recently, I go in. I'm just doing Google chat interviews and stuff. And it's kind of a weird deal. This company can't ask me any questions. I mean, they just can't. They can't ask me any technical questions about who I am. Like, what can you do? You got all these languages on your resume. Well, tell me what you did on Python. Tell me what you did in SQL. Like, tell me. None of those questions. Not a single one. Not even alluding to those questions. Just Hi, man, how are you doing? I said, well, it's funny. You're up there. I used to live there. Oh, really? And it's like 50 to 30-minute interviews, right? This really trendy, fucking agile bullshit, I got a 30-minute sprint, Didn't manage the time well, all that stuff. They're still great people, great company. But anyway, they screwed it up hardcore. But going into this interview, it was an experiment for me, a big experiment. I said to myself, I'm going to just tell them what I've done, tell them what I can do. Try not to, and under any circumstance, be egotistical about it. Just basically tell them some stuff. And it's a little bit of name dropping because when you work with really, intense people who are known for what they do, you got to say their name. Otherwise, they don't know what the hell you're talking about. Oh, this is really neat. CEO, I helped out. You got to say the names. So everything, I think, personally went well until the last three people. Two were dudes and one was a woman who was probably 5 years older than me, could care less about my background, I mean, not literally, but just she wasn't going to be intimidated by anything I said, which was nice. But I could see in through the camera at these other two guys, the more I said what I could do, I just watched their faces. And it was like, to me, it was a very familiar experience from the Bay Area. It was like, I fucking hate you. You'd say something else, oh, I fucking hate you more. And it's like, I don't even want to listen to you anymore. It's either they think I'm lying to them, which could be, or they're like, I don't like you because you're going to like outshine me or something. I know that sounds strange and sounds egotistical almost in a reverse way. But this is something you might struggle with in your life as you really dedicate yourself to get something figured out. Now, I'm going to do a little tangent because you're experiencing this probably in another area in your life right now if you're awake. If you're awake, and let's say you've been awake for like 3 to 5 years at least, right? You've done a lot of research. You've compared a lot of notes. You used to believe what they believe, the blue pill people. That's what you used to believe. You know what it's like to walk in their shoes, to watch the news and go, that's exactly what's happening in reality. And then when you wake up, you're like, oh my God, I was living in a matrix. And so you're like, okay, but I don't know anything just yet. I mean, I know there's like something that's wrong. So you do years and years of research, 12, 14-hour days. You're talking to your buddies. You're nonstop. And then like, okay, you hit your 5-year mark. You get your little badge. Some of you can do it in less time. It's a never-ending process, right? But you will go up to someone who doesn't know jack shit, but needs to think that they do. And you're right up against them, aren't you? And you're like, oh my God, I can't tell them what I know if I don't want a confrontation because it's going to piss them off that I know more than they do about this particular thing. You're not learning this stuff to make anyone feel less. You wish that you had run into someone like you 20 years ago, depending on how old you are, right? If you're only 20, you wish you had been raised into the truth, right? This is what happens to us as individuals. At least it happens to me a lot. So when I look back, I'm sitting there thinking to myself, now, wait a minute, how come I got every single job I ever interviewed for up until, I'd say, well, since I stopped my video game company. Like I got employed from 87 to 2002, and then I've been self-employed ever since. But the couple little gigs I've done since then, I also got those too. And they were sweeping successes. Man, I deployed an application 8 years ago. They're still using it to this day. I go in and I check. I put a backdoor in their software. And their security team did not follow my advice to lock it down. You still need a username and password. Just briefly, the reason why I think I succeeded in the past is I came in at the bottom. When I got to that tax company, the TurboTax people, I went in, it wasn't called that back then, but I go in as tech support. Now, within 3 months, I'm a coder. Within 6 months after that, I was coding one of the double clickable applications. And then it just, I just proved myself through the bottom to the top. Okay. Gaming industry. Well, I started as an artist and worked my way up. I got into electronic arts, programming a QA database because I was a database expert on the outside. Well, they were doing the first Andretti racing game. I had a racing background. They wanted me to test the physics. Move up, move up. You prove yourself, you prove yourself, you move up. Then again, with the music situation, they're like, that dude plays music too. And they're like, yeah, he's going to go and make a soundtrack. Now, this group I recently talked to, I think that they would hate me every single step of the way, right? When I got into EA full time, doing their internet stuff, I had 6 coders. Two people resigned. I got their whole team. Then my boss resigns. I got his job. And so all of a sudden we triple the profits at EA. Oh, who's this new kid? That kind of thing. Oh, now we're building this brand new big multiplayer MMO platform for 20 million consecutive players. We've hired this big consulting firm on the outside. They're going to take care of everything. Well, they crashed and burned hardcore. I had to walk in. It's a legendary meeting where I walked in and it's full of like 40 people and they just can't figure it out. So I just said, here's how we're going to do this. Walked up to a whiteboard, drew the whole thing out, all the directory structures, technology, convergence points, all this other stuff. Dropped the mic, walked out, boom. It just immediately started. Cred, right? So when you develop a skill, because regardless of anything I have done, you've got the same level of skill somewhere in your repertoire. You do. And it could just be a personal skill. Something that you're really good at. It could be a really weird thing. It doesn't matter. It could be unique and weird, which is even better. I want you to feel confident by the time you're done with this episode to represent yourself and to have some strategies. After this last experience, there's a couple things that happens to me that may not happen to you, but because I do so many different things professionally right now in my life, people can't figure it out. They're like, wait a minute, you don't do this job right now? I'm like, no, not right now, but I've done it to exemplary levels at previous positions, some legendary situations in your position that you've got. Like you watched it on the internet when it happened. They say, oh, you write movies. Oh, well, that's not what we're doing. You do 3D renderings. Well, you don't. We're not doing anything related to that. Like, what the hell are you doing, applying for our position? And then you start trying to drop what you do. And no matter what I do, some folks get all caught up in that mishmash. Some people are very linear too. They can only think about doing one thing a day. You put 2 things in their cart, man, they are just lost. They start crying at the Toys R Us, man. Put diapers in my cart. I'm trying to buy toys. Hey, man, they sell cheap diapers. Just get them, man. Okay. So you're going to have to read the kind of person you're talking to and really analyze the situation to figure out how you're going to approach this. For instance, I haven't had a resume for 25 years that has everything I've ever done on it. And I don't mean cutting off the past, because the past is the past and it's irrelevant. I can't say what I do a lot of the times. I have to craft resumes such that they look like I've only been doing one thing. And it's crappy. Maybe that's just the way it has to be in the employment realm. And I don't know how much I'm going to reach out to folks anymore without a warm introduction, because that was the other thing that happened is I got a warm introduction. I had a headhunter back in the Bay Area. Man, that dude, he was actually in Los Angeles, but that dude, Bob Mork was his name. He's vicious, man. 5 interviews, 5 jobs. I mean, this guy just couldn't miss, man. It was awesome. But now let me give you another example of something that's more inside your circle, because this one's important for you personally. Forget everybody else in the whole world. I'm going to give you an example on my side, which I've only recently come to terms with in the last year or 2, which is my memory. When I was really young, I had a great memory for scientific facts. Man, anything I was interested in, man, just how shit worked. I just could, if I read it, I just memorized it. It was weird. It just became a part of me. But when my schooling came around and it was talking about like the Civil War and when the Industrial Revolution happens and all this other stuff, man, I could give 2 fucks. So I just couldn't figure out a paradigm to remember history. And somewhere, I don't know when it started. I honestly don't remember when it started. I'm thinking the late 90s at the earliest, probably during my Egyptology years, where you start memorizing the pharaohs and all this, even though it's all bullshit years. But anyway, I started painting one of those histograms, one of those pictures in my brain. And it was like every either millennia or century, depending on how the information comes to you, how it's organized in the history books, it all became pictorial. Became super easy to remember. It was like the mural at your favorite restaurant that you went to since you were a kid and you've been staring at it for 20 years and you know every tile or every drop of paint on the wall sort of thing, right? And so then doing this show absolutely supercharged it. But when I started waking up in 2005 and stringing together all of the conspiracies in my life and just the chain of events, first it was in the 20th century. And then obviously I'm living the 21st. I got to research the 19th century. I got family in those centuries that have their own history. And then all the cause and effect models, years that things occurred. And so it allowed me to pace in my mind how these people took over the United States slowly. Then I get branched back to Europe and I can start, I'm a little fuzzier in Europe because there's some fuzzy eras, between like 1500 and say 1200. It's kind of blurry in that realm. Then 1200 to say 900 is pretty good. 900 back to 360s, sort of bad. And then 360 back probably to the Babylonian time is pretty clear. But then again, the information is so surgical. You might have a Plato memory or Plato fact. You might have a bunch of a string of Caesars, how the Roman Catholic Church came into power, all these different niches within these areas. You don't have the whole history of how all these countries moved around, right? But information got better too. Go on the internet and watch a bunch of animated videos to show you how the European factions moved around, how Germany got, gigantic for a really long time and then shrunk and then grew and then shrunk and all that stuff, right? So my memory, I call it photographic, but there are different types of photographic memories. There's people who can just look at books and memorize whole pages, and they can read them back to you sentence by sentence. The punctuation is memorized. That's autistic stuff, man. That is like, I'm not even sure how useful it is to them. Hopefully it is. I'm a very interest-based memorizer. So if I'm interested, I put it in there. Now, again, the other crappy thing, like I've mentioned in several shows, is that if someone gives me a bogus date or I hear it wrong the second that I hear it, someone's yelling a year across the room and I think they said 38 and they said 36. That gets in there and, man, I have to go in and scrape that thing out. It's almost like redoing hieroglyphs in stone, But I was very bashful about admitting to myself that that's the way my memory works now until I started talking on this show. So one of the first times I ever mentioned it was on one of these shows at some point. But now I'm just telling people, if the subject comes up, that this is sort of one of my things. And it's not necessarily a blessing in every regard. In some cases, it's a curse. Again, especially if something gets wrong. Or someone starts asking me about the history of something. They say, oh, I really want to know about that. Tell me. And can you imagine me compressing an hour into like 20 minutes of just fact, stuff we can verify. And they're just starting to go, oh God, okay, I got to stop. I can't retain what you're spitting out. And there's no reason why they should, even if they did have a really good memory, because the amount of information that I'm dumping on them is quicker, faster, and more detailed than I personally took it in. I had years to put this stuff away. So I've got a whole exit routine in that conversation about how to make them laugh and stuff and say, yeah, I know. It's an industrial fan, isn't it? Yeah, well, I love it. I just, I'm full. I'm done. I got to file this stuff away for a little while. But we know in society there's a bunch of forces that tell you to not acknowledge who you are because you'll be, viewed as an asshole. And there's definitely a bunch of advice in that realm that is very, very real, and you got to be very, very careful. Being some sort of authority in conversation when people may be talking to each other, and you're at a restaurant, you're outside eating a taco, you're at a smoke lounge, whatever the case might be, you're at a party, and people are carrying propaganda forward, and you're kind of like, oh my God, I can't hear this anymore. And you try to go in there and straighten everything out. That's a real bad habit. I mean, that's not something you should do. Just let them be wrong. They're not going to like you extra a lot because you're telling them that they're wrong. Nobody wants to ever hear that they're wrong, including you, including me. But I've seen it several times where I've had things, when I was much younger, had things incorrect, and I'm at a party and I think I'm recalling things properly, and I wasn't, and it was not something I really cared about. And I remember one time, it was a guy who was just about a year older than me, but he was in our 20s. The dude was 10, 20 years older than me in his brain. He had just been through a lot in his lifetime. And he went in the military. He did missile silo duty, which is a very rigorous evaluation of who he is as a person. He dealt with lots of stress doing that. So by the time I was talking to him in our mid to late 20s, he had been through the machine, man. And I remember just quoting something about a music video. And I had the context of a particular piece of dialogue between two characters, a little skit in front of the video. I had it wrong. And he listened to me tell some other people in the room what I thought was really the case in this video. And he just kind of sat there, and I'll never forget this because it really had a great impression on me. And he said, he waited to see what they were going to say. And they were like, oh, okay. And they didn't care. I shouldn't have said anything at all. I was being immature. And he said, well, I think if you watch that back, what you'll see is this person was actually saying that. And then that person replied to this. And I think what they meant was this. Classy as shit. And I remember looking at him going, oh my God, you're right. You're probably totally right. And I just made a total dick out of myself. And that changed my life forever. I'm not saying I got as cool as him instantaneously or anything, but boy, when I recalled information from that point forward, if I didn't have his level of clarity, I just didn't say anything. And man, it made me feel so much better. But I'm going to tell you the trick I'm going to use if I ever end up in a situation I was recently in. And this may work and this may not work. I think it will. But there's two things. You have to say, look, like for me personally, I'm just going to give you a formula. This is a formula of how to sort of parse the situation such that you can create your own formula that might work for you if this is the case. Because if you have to say, let's just say you're good at one thing, but you're damn good at it. And it may make somebody in the room feel insecure. Now, the employer, if they're truly an A player, like Steve Jobs used to say, they should want to hire someone who's equally as talented as they are, or almost, or even more. But what I have to do is say, okay, here's the thing. I build my personal resume to include everything online because I don't know who's going to be coming at me for whatever. I got a whole screenwriting gig because of this show on YouTube. I got paid to write a movie. 2 different runs on it, a year apart from each other. At the same time, I might get, some looking at me for 3D. I don't do music anymore, so I'm not worried about that one. Someone might come to me for all kinds of different web design or something like that. I hate to even say it. Or design in general, logos and stuff. I'm really good with logos. So not everybody is. Or maybe they want coding. Maybe they want management. Maybe they want a CTO. Maybe just want a partner to help grow a company for a very short period of time. Whatever it might be. I'm creating a mousetrap for all these different things. So if I go to an employer and they don't have a warm recommendation, I'll just say, look, I do a lot of stuff. Don't let it freak you out. I'm extremely dedicated and focused. I haven't dropped the ball once in my entire career. There's not a single human being out there that can say, that dude let me down. Nobody can say that. Quite the opposite, right? Now, as far as I know, you want my skills. You're looking for someone in these skill sets, right? I have a really intense portfolio in those skill sets. In a way, working in different projects that I don't have documented in my resume, I've done those things recently. They're just so surgical and so weird, and some of them are, quite frankly, NDA'd out of existence. I'm never to say I worked on those things. I don't put them in there. But I can tell you face to face, right? So let's begin. So at that point, I've sort of set the expectations. They go look inside the mousetrap or the box of mousetraps, and they find that diversity. But I'm telling them, look, I know what you're doing. I know what you're doing. Here's my past. I only got better. I didn't get worse at it. Okay. I do keep up on all things in professional sectors. The other one that's very interesting is that I routinely will be in and out of think tanks that are very intense think tanks with very intense people, like very, very high up individuals in I wouldn't even say companies, but I would say governmental departments that are like, they build robots and shit, They invent the internet. They do all kinds of stuff from time to time. Now, I'm not picking and choosing who's coming into the think tank. When you get in a think tank, you're just invited because you have an exceptional perception, skill, whatever. It's not just because you're a nice guy. You have to be able to contribute something to whatever's on the table. Usually think tanks have charters. Some of them could be as basic as, hey, we're just getting a bunch of really cool people together and see if you can build something. Others are like, I've been brought into a think tank because I was a writer. And then they found out I was a business person too. And they found out my background. And there's just no limit in a think tank. If you got the information, they want to know it. And they're sharing all kinds of amazing, amazing information that it is literally the people who control the world sometimes in these organizations. They got the ears of everybody who controls everything, right? But, I can't really sit around and drop that because how am I going to recreate that for anyone listening? It's going to seem, oh, aren't you important sort of statement. What that really means is some people might belong to a country club and they're like, I belong to Bel Air Country Club and I got a lot of friends there. So, you're in that business, right? Okay, well, next time I'm there, I'll just float it. I got a couple buddies that talk to you regularly from Bel Air and I'll just see if anyone's interested. That guy is also a member at Augusta. And so if he's interested, he'll take it over there if we can lock down whatever the heck we're trying to do. And it just spreads. And so a lot of these clubs have access to people you don't have access to. I mean, I eat dinner right next to John Williams, dude. I mean, it's crazy. The people you can get close to at times, So think tanks are very much like that. Now, some of you are just absolutely brilliant about being modest about the situation. And that's one of the other kind of gotchas. There probably is a way for you to be modest with every single person you talk to. The problem in an interview process is you don't know who these people are at all. So if I had taken every person I talked to in this interview that I think had an issue, which is at least 2 guys, and I had a chance to sit them down at a cigar lounge and then listen to them talk. Listen to them react to what's on TV. Listen to them talk to their buddies and see where their mind's at. What kind of person are they? Are they secure in themselves or are they insecure? The cool thing about lounges is that someone else will usually kick it off. Someone else, let's say you're in there and you got this crazy skill and there's someone talking to me and I know that you can help them. And you just stay quiet. You're in a sofa, sitting down, lounging, smoking a stick, watching whatever, looking at your phone. And I'll say, you know what? It really sounds to me like you need to meet this guy. This dude is fantastic at that. And I give you this big warm introduction. And then all of a sudden the guy's like, whoa, really? What do you do? And then all of a sudden magic happens. You guys start a business together. You share a contract together. Maybe make 20 grand in the next, 2 months or whatever. And that's how it happens in SoCal a lot. Not so much in the Bay Area, unless you're in one of those very special groups. One thing that was interesting is when I got into Steve Jobs' little circle of his VPs, they were very much like the game industry. They were just happy you knew how to do something. They were happy you knew people that they could, meet and shake hands and things would happen, but they would always include you too at the same time. They didn't just say, okay, thanks a lot, see you later. They were like, okay, well, you introduce us, so we don't want to be there without you. Very cordial group of people, very amazing people, all Bay Area regulars. So they're there. They're just in different industries. But now let's talk about the mirror for 1 second, because you hear me mention the mirror a lot in episodes, because I want you to be able to look in the mirror and see your qualities. Because typically what ends up happening is the more honest you get in life, you feel like, okay, that one of your jobs is to pick on yourself. And there's two ways to do that. There's a destructive way of doing that, and there's a constructive way of doing that. Now, there are certain things that are an attribute of your character, right? The way you think is an attribute of your character. And you may be thinking in sort of a negative way. And so whatever it is, it could be super subtle and no one else would even think it's negative. But for you, you know where you want to be, and this one thought process, maybe just being lazy, is keeping you held down. So you could look in the mirror and you could call yourself lazy. You know why you're here. You're just lazy as hell, right? That's bad. Most of you have heard that when you affirm something negative to the human mind, it doesn't know what's really going on the outside. I mean, your soul is back there trying to do its job, but your soul, body, mind connection, that apparition is your mind, that temporary memory while the computer's on is your mind. Shut it off, that mind, it's gone. But as long as you're alive, there's some version of that running, some operating system that's running. Now, if you want to make a change, to say laziness is the thing, right? You want to look in the mirror and go, you know what? We're really good at what we do, And we should just do what we're really good at because we love it, right? We love it. And yeah, you are a little bit tired. But we can get over that, can't we? We just got to get a little more sleep. And we need to give ourselves some time to pull off the change. But sometimes, there's two types of things you can change in your life, right? Mentally, you could have an overnight epiphany. I am never doing that again. And boom, your life gets better. It's amazing. It just, bad habits kind of seep into our lives. We don't make a decision one day to do something negative in our life. It just seeped in. But once you identify it, man, you can just nail that thing cold turkey half the time. I'm only talking about the way that you think. Anytime you want to change something, be very positive to yourself about it. Even when you're just walking around your house, driving in your car, maybe you're not a person that likes to talk out loud. When you create thoughts in your mind, create them positively, okay? I know for a lot of you, that's not a new thing, but sometimes we need a little reminder, don't we? Now, let's say that you got something that's going to take a little while. You say you put on 20 pounds. I did it once. 2009, I weighed 25 pounds more than I should have. I've told the story several times in the past. Okay, so I looked at myself in a photograph my buddy gave me, and I was like, who the fuck is that guy? And I realized it was me. Seriously, could barely recognize myself. And so I said, okay, I got to do something different here. Then I needed to identify, what was I doing that was making me so heavy? I'd never been heavy in my life. What the hell happened? This all happened within, because here's what's funny. I've got my 4th of July photos from 2008. By December 2009, I weighed 25 pounds more. What the hell was I doing? Well, the ironic thing is, the guy that gave me the photograph was a chef, and he's a friend of mine, and he was paying me with food and beer. I don't really drink beer. But Newcastle, he got it on draft. It was kind of new in our area. And so, man, I was pounding these beers. And the funny thing was, I was at his restaurant, and he offered this guy that came in and delivered something, hey, you want a beer? We just set up the bar. My brother just built it. I got my license. We're all good. And the guy said, no, thank you. He goes, I love beer. But he goes, you know what happens to me when I drink beer? And he put his thumb in his mouth and he blew up his cheeks. Like he was turning his face into a balloon. He goes, I just blow up as soon as I drink beer. And it was looking at that guy from across the room, right around the time this was happening. I said, oh shit, that's probably one giant contributor to me just becoming a lard. And so the other thing too was just drinking too much wine, which is all sugar. Everybody forgets that. Eating pizzas and watching TV with my girlfriend. Oh my God, I'd eat too much. Shitty food. It can't be digested. It was just a litany of things. Here's the thing. I said, okay, I got to stop eating so much. But this weight's not just going to leave the second that I make the decision to stop eating too much. I had to give myself some time. About 3 years later, I started working out hardcore. When I started the show in 2015, I had just buffed out, more than I had in a long time since high school. So after I gained control over the whole thing, I started studying all my food, started studying my regimen, when am I exercising, when am I not, just lifted my backpack with my computer in it, my power supply and my water bottle and stuff. That fucking thing must weigh 25 pounds, 30 pounds. I'm carrying that thing around all day. Carry it to design meetings in the afternoon, carry it to the lounge, carry it back in the house. And so I'm like, okay, upper body, it's not cardiovascular, all that stuff. But you get my drift. I created a regimen with the crap that I have. I got weights and a yoga mat and all this other shit I work on. But that makes me happy. That personally makes me happy. But what I never did, and it's not my instinct, is to beat myself up in the mirror, which means any solitary moment you have with yourself. So that's a correctional phase of this episode. But the other big one that this episode's about is you being comfortable with being who you are. It's okay to say, man, I'm pretty fucking good at that thing. And I've definitely heard, dozens and dozens of dudes at the cigar lounges I've been to. And, they'll have to tell you that they're really good at what they do. But what's funny is some of the most OG guys in the world that are exceptional at what they do. I mean, they're super exceptional. They're not looking to get hired by anyone. They're self-employed. And so their sort of exhibition of their skills is very rare. I had an attorney buddy of mine for about a year and a half. He was coming to HB from New York. Dude looked like an actor, like a really handsome fit. It was like you take Fabio and Depardieu and you mix them together, take all the weight off, full, like crazy head of hair. You come in like a surfer, dude. And we were watching, Goliath on Amazon, which is all about an attorney who's kicking ass and taking names. This guy's this like badass attorney in New York City. But what does that mean? What does that mean? What are you defending against, right? And he would sit there and pick the show apart, and he would also say, man, that's exactly the way it is, man. So he had more positive things to say than anything negative. Every once in a while he'd be like, that's not the way it works. And he explained it to us, and it was just fascinating. We'd show him conspiracy stuff because they were like, okay, you tell me what you think. Is this enough evidence to prove anything? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. But it got to the point in the conversation, I don't even remember exactly how it triggered. But I asked him, I said, what kind of cases do you try? And he said, well, I just defended AIG against Goldman Sachs and I won $6 billion. I defended against a $6 billion lawsuit. I said, was it you are you a partner of a gigantic firm? He says, well, I built a firm. He goes, I'm one of the founders, and I'm the founder, really. He said, but I got partners and stuff, but I was the main guy, and we tore him a new ass. And I'm saying, look at this guy going, if you'd seen this dude, you would have sworn he was like an ex-actor from the 80s or something, like a huge heartthrob kind of guy. And I look at this guy going, damn, that's, I mean, it's his word, of course, but man, the dude was super smart and super humble. But he got a chance because I asked the question to tell me how badass he was. And it was just a perfect storm of me getting out what he did, But here he was. He was that person the entire time he was at our lounge. He didn't say anything because he's not worried about getting new work from anyone. But now what if that guy was in sort of a he wasn't going to be an attorney, but let's say he was even going to be some sort of, he's got kind of so much clout, it's a ridiculous example, but if he had to sort of go into a different business that wasn't necessarily specifically legal, but he wanted to kind of establish the fact that he's a serious guy and he's very analytical and he's also good at big players at the table, let's just say. He's got these cases that are just legendary. Cases that should be in international news, but aren't. Okay. There was no news of that conflict between those two massive companies, right? He would have to find some way to tactfully lay down his resume, to tactfully distill out of his experience what's going to be applicable to this new thing without making anyone feel like he's gloating or being insecure about himself, or to make anyone else feel insecure across the table. But now, let me throw this little paradigm shift at you. and this is my problem. This is one of my personal problems. I loathe, in a professional circumstance at least, like I can tell you guys stories about my past and it's sort of just like you're my buddies and I'm just telling you, right? But in a professional sense, I don't like talking about my accomplishments because I know at some point it gets either confusing for people or intimidating for people. It just depends on who they are. Some people are born jealous. It's the weirdest thing. Instead of, my parents are jealous. It's just a weird thing. Instead of them saying, oh my God, I gave birth to this kid and he went off and did really cool things, they're just like, you know, one of them's cool nowadays, but he was rough afterwards. But one of them is still sort of like, I just can't talk about that. I can't talk about that because that wasn't me. It's petty. It's just strange. And you're like, okay, well, I guess I can't tell you about my life. Don't ask me how I'm doing. Because if I did something really cool, I got to listen to you go into some thing about how I'm wrong that I did it or some fucking weird thing, right? It's a sort of defense mechanism, you know? But here's the paradigm shift for you. And some of you already do this, and kudos to you that you figured it out. I always tell you you're good at what you do. Meaning, be careful everything that you do throughout a day, because that's what you're going to be good at. So you got bad habits? Well, that's what you're going to be good at. Good habits? Well, if you don't have any, you won't be good at any good habits, which usually involves a little bit of discipline. I mean, there's some freakazoids that have bad habits and a lot of discipline. But if you don't practice being you authentically to yourself, which might sound sort of stupid, but if you don't allow yourself to be confident in what you do, how can you possibly figure out a way to ever tell another human being that you're good at that thing? Because in the end, it's going to be a word choice. It's going to be either words in an email or it's going to be words coming out of your mouth with a tone that comes along with it. And then you're going to have to, again, try to amass some information from the other person. But here's what I found in this latest round of interviews with these people. I forget that people are fake sometimes. And it's not that they're bad people and it's not the bad fake. It's just that they are putting on a persona because they never met you before. So they're pushing everything to the front that they think will make you comfortable or make you happy. And so you're not getting who they really are. You're not seeing any insecurities in them that when you start speaking authentically, they can register it. And sometimes they're going to be pushing forward a bunch of fake stuff at you, but what they want to hear from you is the authentic stuff back. It's just part of an interview process. Well, one of my weaknesses, I think, is that, and it's strengthened by the show and sharing stuff, but I still need to work on it every day, is how do I describe what I do? I was eating tacos the other day, and the woman who runs the stand, she's kind of learned over the last year that I'm sort of a jack of all trades sort of thing, right? And so I'm talking to her just to say hi, because she's outside. She's not always outside. So I always give her a big hug. And this other really cool dude's on a bicycle, and he's talking to her, and they're just in the middle of a conversation. I didn't want to stop anything, so I just hug her. And something goes back and forth between her and I. She's always asking me how I'm doing and what I did last night, like work-wise. Did you do your 3D stuff? Did you do one of your shows? She just kind of knows, right? And this guy looks at me and he goes, oh, what are you? Like, what do you do for a living? And I said, I just do a lot of stuff. And he immediately said, oh, are you a jack of all trades? And I said, well, I guess you could say that. And he goes, what do you do? Like electricity? He thinks I'm a handyman. I said, no. And it's like this, and this, and this, And he's like, oh, I didn't expect that kind of answer. He also did that funny reply that I told you guys in my screenwriting episodes. Every time you tell someone that you're a screenwriter outside of the industry, they'll always say that kiss of death. I got this great idea. It's immediately what he said. And to my surprise, he said, I need someone to follow me around and just film my life. I got this interesting life. First, I thought he was like, really? All right, I don't know you, man. Maybe you are that guy. And he showed me a little video. He rides around that bicycle. He's retired. He's pretty young. He's probably late 50s or whatever. And he's showing me like videos going to car shows that morning, and he really did a great job. I said, you don't need me. I said, just go up and make a YouTube channel. I already got a YouTube channel. I said, well, then upload it, man. Just give it a good title of what you're talking about. Say car show or whatever. Give yourself a good brand. And he's got a good brand. And he owns a domain and everything. And so I was like, just do it, man. And it was kind of like he just needed to be told that he was very capable so he could go off and do it, instead of realizing what he was already good at and just doing it by himself until he needs help. He doesn't need any help. At least I don't think he does. He was smart enough to register a domain, get a brand on YouTube that matched it. He was good. What are the other kisses of death? If you're good at either one thing and there's multiple dimensions to it that you want to note, or you're good at many things, which automatically introduces a bunch of dimensions to your character, is that I was getting, in this interview process with these two dudes, I was getting just deer eyes on the other side. I wasn't quite sure why, In the end, I think my assessment's probably fairly accurate if God was in the room and had a lie detector test, right? So I'm sitting there, and what I needed to do, this is what I wasn't instinctually good at this at all just recently, is to say something. Well, one, I should have forced them to say something. I should have said something to the effect of, what can I do for you? And let them lead the conversation and then contribute nothing back but the answer. That's another strategy. Because when you're insecure, which I think is at least two of these dudes, I need them to lead the conversation 1,000%. What do you need to know from me? What do you need to do? What do you need me to be able to do for this job? Instead, I took the lead because that's my nature. I got into a mistake, which was I was trying to entertain the deadpan silence, right? It was like the television program the signal went dead and someone just grabbed a mic and jumped in front of a camera. That was me, and I was trying to entertain. Which, I don't know. I mean, you don't know what they're interested in. And I'm very multidimensional with experiences. I think that, there was some conversation about hanging out with nerds, basically. That was their question to me, one of the guys. He framed it slightly different, but that's what he was asking me. And I thought it was sort of a discriminatory question, but I was going to go for the answer. And so I was like, hey, look, these are my best friends my entire life. I said, being an engineer my whole life, I don't have any tolerance issues with that. I don't feel like I'm not one of them and I'm tolerating them. I am one of them, And I gave him a few examples that were outside of the coding industry. I don't know how that went over because there was no response. Again, it was like seriously being interviewed by NPCs, right? My quest giving program doesn't have a reply for that, Full forward, that was all I was getting back. But now let's go to another dimension. Another dimension is especially if you're a guy, but I will tell you, ladies, it works for you just as much as it does for the guys, depending, I guess, on what kind of guy you want. If you want a beta male, this probably won't work. Or maybe it does. I don't know. I watch Frasier with Miles and his weird wife. Confidence is a big seller in humanity. Why do people wear panties on their face right now? Why do they go get bad regimens for their health? Because they want a person of confidence to tell them that that's a good idea. Because they're afraid. Life comes with a lot of challenges, doesn't it? Why not spend it with someone who's very confident about what the solutions are and seems to have done fairly well in their life? You're not going to probably go up to, Steve Martin in The Jerk when he's a bum at the beginning and get life advice from the guy. But if you had met him when he was head of the OptiGrab company, you probably would have gotten advice from the guy because he's balling, right? That's a reference for you older people. So the more that you can carry yourself confident, not arrogant, right? The difference is that I think the threshold between confidence and ego, if you haven't seen the episode, is, in my opinion, you going overboard, which I probably did through just having to lead the conversation 99% of the time in these, I don't even know if you wouldn't even call them interviews, talking sessions I had with these two guys. I talked too much in this interview. I should have shut up. Let there be that deadpan fucking silence. Let the guys on the other side realize that they're absolutely unqualified to be trying to investigate someone's qualifications for any position at all, right? But confidence takes some experience. Confidence takes some time. You have to get confident with yourself and find out what part of your confidence needs to be externalized and what part of your confidence needs to be inside you. If you have a medical emergency in public, a person who wants to help but is not a doctor, who's experienced this exact situation before, they're going to help, but you're going to notice in their face, they're shaking hands, that they're not sure that what they're doing is the appropriate thing. When a doctor shows up, they see it. They've done it 100 times, if not 1,000 times in an ER, and they're like, okay, do this. I had a guy die in his chair at the terminal at John Wayne. And he just fell asleep in his chair. He must have had a massive heart attack, and he ended up slumping over, and someone finally figured out he was turning colors. They put him on the ground, and citizens were, before I even looked over, it was about 10 feet away from me. This dude was turning purple, man. His arms were turning purple, man. It was bad, and they were pumping his chest, and God bless the people who tried to help that guy out. And it took for a fucking ever for the medical staff to show up. And we got TSA everywhere, and no one showing up for like 15 minutes. This guy was dead. We got on the plane, and they said that the medical professionals were able to get him alive again, but I'm counting off the minutes going, okay, how many minutes was he dead before anyone ever found him? I watched him 10 or 15 minutes with just civilians on him. It's probably at least 15 minutes. And they're taking their sweet time, it wasn't like Rampart on, the 70s television show where they fucking bust open the fish kit and fucking hit him with the defibrillator. I mean, this guy needed to be defibbed, 10 minutes ago if he had a chance. But I have a buddy of mine who's in a coma right now, and he wasn't defibbed for a long time, and they had to hit him twice. And so I think he was on the ground for 20 minutes. So perhaps they didn't lie to us when we got on the plane and said that they got him resuscitated. Hope to God they did, but everybody on the plane is looking at they said, oh, just so you know, the guy in the terminal, he's fine now. And these people who worked on him are on the plane, and they're looking at each other like, don't fucking lie to us, man. No one said anything because we're just hoping for the best. No one wants to project any negativity. But just think about the difference between you approaching the problems that you know how to solve with the acknowledgement to yourself that this is what you're good at. The amount of times I've seen people who are really good at stuff second guess themselves out of thin air for no good reason. No good reason at all. They haven't failed before, but they carry that thought that they could fail, and they don't want that on their record. So not trying means you don't fail in their mind, which means you immediately fail is the problem. Taking a little bit of risk. When you get confident with yourself, okay, and you allow yourself to give yourself your own report card is what I'm probably trying to say in so many words, right? And let's say you're in a job that you don't dig so much. It's not awful, but maybe it is awful. Who knows? What's that movie, Office Space, right? Late 90s, Mike Judge's first movie with all the flair, right? What was the whole story arc of the main character? He was docile to his boss, Lumberg. He kept asking him to come in on weekends, and he just, God, I know he's going to come around on Friday, and he's going to ask me to come in on the weekends, and I'm not going to be able to say no. And the whole thing was that he went to a hypnotist who happened to have a heart attack during the hypnotism thing, but he got hypnotized to stop smoking so he could be with his fiance. It was her idea. It was that real heavy-set guy from, Whose Line Is It? Brilliant comedian. And he hypnotizes the main character, tells him he doesn't want to smoke anymore, and then the guy has a heart attack and never gets him out of the hypnotism. So he spends 2 or 3 days giving no fucks, right? And he goes into work, and he takes the electric screwdriver, and he undoes his cubicle and just knocks it open so he can see the light that's just on the other side of the wall that's being blocked from him. And Lumberg comes around and tells him, hey, you can't do this. And he's like, I think I'm going to do it. And then you find out they're downsizing the corporation. They got the 2 Bobs in a room. And he walks in not giving a fuck about anything, right? And his confidence and his hypnotized state appeals to the two Bobs so much that when Lumbergh finally comes in to get interviewed, that if you watch the movie, it is one of the most brilliant cinematic things you've ever seen. Lumbergh sits down to the two Bobs, and the camera is behind Lumbergh. And he thinks he's going to get the other dude fired, right? And slowly, as the scene unfolds in the first 10 seconds, Mike Judge had the camera go all the way around and face him. So the two Bobs are facing him, and the Bobs tell him, I think the problem is you. You haven't been challenging him enough. And the metaphor there is they turn the tables on the guy right inside the camera. It's fucking brilliant, right? What was the difference? The main character found a mechanism to finally get to be who he really was and to acknowledge who he really was in the movie. And the other giant metaphor I just realized the other day, I was telling a friend of mine, and she was like, oh my God, you're right. At the very end, the guy with the stapler burned the whole place down. And this guy is now joining a construction group. And he is shoveling the ashes of his old business, which is like, it's the full story of the whole thing. This company that was a bunch of assholes at the management level, he is literally just shoveling, and his buddies run over from the other company and they're like, hey man, we just got brand new jobs. You come over here and get a brand new job. And he just looks at him and says, no, thanks. I think I like what I'm doing. I'm going to work outside for a little while. The hypnotizing situation was his training wheels. Okay. And you can give yourself these training wheels. And man, it's just, I don't know. It's one of those sort of catchphrases from the 90s, empowering you, It really is, man. That's the kind of power and control you want in your life, is to be able to just say, you know what? I know who I am and I know who I'm not. If I want to be that thing I'm not, I got to get some work ahead of me. If who I am is something that needs to be molded and changed just a little bit, maybe I did get a little bit of ego in the middle of that whole thing. I have fun. The only time I ever play with ego, and I've said this once before, is that I make jokes out of it, right? I'll make an absolutely absurd joke. If I walk in a room and someone says, oh, there's the guy that does that, and I'll go into some Andy Kaufman Elvis impression, and I just start saying shit like I'm the best in the world at whatever it is, and it's just absurd, and I make people laugh, and that's it, But it's never serious, okay? Thing is, you have the right to be who the hell you are, and society is trying to say, oh, look at this color of your skin. And, it's, just look at maybe Dr. Saul, right? Probably the easiest way to say it. A guy that you can't contest his intelligence, who used to be a Marxist, and now he's absolutely not. But if you're white, you're supposed to feel very, very guilty. You got privilege, man. You got privilege problems, right? And if you're any other thing than white, then you're supposed to feel like indirectly from those groups that you are actually inferior and you need a bunch of help. You need a bunch of help. In fact, you need to steal whitey stuff because you can't get it any other way. You got to take it from other people. And that's insulting beyond belief. So both hemispheres of the solution is all bullshit, and it's designed to get you gaslit, right? I mean, really, all these contradicting truths that neither one of them are true. And all of them are destructive to who you are as a person. Anytime a regimen of society is making you crawl back in a hole, when you haven't violated anything, you haven't angered anyone with your behavior, you even if you made someone feel insecure, you didn't say it in any way that said, okay, by the way, I'm this good and you're not. You just simply said, well, yeah, I got first prize in the contest, when I was a kid, or I ran the marathon, I came in first. I mean, imagine if you're in the Bay Area, here's how this goes. You have a conversation with other joggers and you say, yeah, I ran the marathon here in San Francisco and I actually won. Everyone in the room hates you for winning. You say that in LA, I ran the LA marathon and I won. Everyone's like, oh my God, this dude won the marathon? Oh my God, it's amazing. That's the difference in culture between the two societies. It's just a fucked up thing, man. But this stuff is infamous in families. It's infamous in friends, quote unquote, friend circles sometimes, right? I think one of the funniest examples, I can't believe I'm giving this example. This is the tormented past of watching chick flicks with my girlfriends. The Legally Blonde series, right? There's another one too. It's not Legally Blonde. I forgot. It's Chris Pratt's old wife, I think. I don't mean old in any negative way. I think it's her. Maybe it's not. Anyway, it's a character that is a very privileged, rich person and very demeaning to other people, but ignorant about the whole thing. We have an element of that when we're younger. Hopefully we shed that and we empathetically figure out what we're saying and how it makes other people feel. But you can hang on to those microscopic versions of that stuff in your adulthood without even trying sometimes, you know? So I think that, again, casual encounters, you just let it organically fall out. Yeah, well, you know, I've done pretty well in this industry. You know, I've written 5 films or whatever, you know, and, you know, I've been pretty successful in that whole thing. And that way it's not like, hey, I guess what I do, and da-da-da-da. You know, sometimes I'll blatantly say that if someone else is a writer, I'm like, oh man, you know, I do this. But then we're sharing an experience. We're both happy for each other's careers, right? You know me, man. I'm all about finding someone who's got a dream and making sure that you go after it. And as much as LL Cool J introducing President Biden today was a joke and a half, he did sit down and take an interview for a totally different reason. He said something really interesting, that we're taught the opposite, and he beat it up the other way. Didn't put down the other way, which is, you know, was it a goal without a deadline is a dream? You always hear that. And there's a lot of logic to that, trust me. But I will say that he submitted the inverse. And he said, look, man, he goes, dreams don't have deadlines. He said, just do 2 things. Whatever it is you love to do, just keep doing it. Just keep doing it every day. Focus, focus, focus. That's what he always taught me, you know, focus, focus, focus. And he said, don't ever let the negativity get into your conversation with yourself. And especially, he made the point of saying, I've said it 100 times on the show, and every famous person who's ever succeeded will say it in their own way. He put it on point, though. It was perfect. He said, look, he said, never accept this notion that other people are special and you're not. They have special genes, special bloodlines, and they get to do things you don't get to do. Now, of course, ruling the world is probably something you don't want to do. But, you know, we're talking about whatever creative goal you might have, whatever business goal you might have, whatever goal you have, period. Don't let anything get in there inside your mind and psych you out to concede. The only time you concede to not doing something that you wanted to do in the past is that you decide, after trying it out several times, you know what, I don't think I'm that interested in this. But don't use that as an excuse to bail on your dream. That's the other thing. I'm working on this intro for season 7. And there's a couple analogies I could give you for working on the intro to season 7 as I've designed it. Now, I could back off and create something really easy and launch the whole season 7. But I know I can do this. But it's like a big giant redwood tree, and I've got a hatchet. And this tree is so big you could drill a hole through it and drive a semi through it, and it's got enough tree left that it stands up and it's 1,100 feet tall. That's one analogy. The other one is someone kicking you in the balls every 5 seconds, all day long, the second that you wake up. That's another analogy of creating the season 7 intro. But I'm going to do it. I'm pushing. Just before I did this show, I grabbed more reference, and I'm working on stuff, and I'm going to go inside and do probably an hour before I go to bed. Perseverance. Push, push, push. Because here's the thing. Once you finish something that's big, that you set out, the fun thing is the entire time you're doing something really freaking hard that you don't think you can do. I mean, you think you know you can do it, and if you're alive and you're a human being, you can do it. Even in a wheelchair, even if you're driving the screen with your eyeballs, you can get it done, right? It just might take a little longer, that's all. When you're done, talk about the reward that you get. One, that you've made other people potentially happy with whatever you created, but the other thing too is even if no one else sees it, next time you go to that mirror, you're like, damn, what else can I do? Should I set the bar even higher? I mean, because, hey, you know, what was impossible last year because I'd never done it before is now totally not just possible, is what I do. I'm getting good at what I do. This new level of insane, what was insanity a year ago is now just whatever. It's what I do. And so then you can set the bar higher for the next year and go, go, go. And then someone else is going to notice and go, we saw your work. You want a job? Boom. There's a big part of that with what I'm doing here. It's a portfolio piece as well as it's applicable. Anyway, I've talked enough. Again, I'm gonna tell you, visit this video in a month and it won't have 500 views. But if you did listen to it, you'll know that a lot of people need to hear this message. I'm trying to help those of you who have a lot of life left. I want you to avoid the mistakes that I've made. I want to insert strategies so that you can come up with better solutions. Because you can. You can kick my ass all over the park with better solutions and do it. Do it. Get good at solving problems, man. It'll keep you young, keep your brain fresh, your life happy, and you'll be invincible. You'll be invincible. When bad things happen, you're like, hey, you know what? I used to do that for a living, but I changed my career over here to this one. Didn't think I'd do that. And now whatever's going on in my world, they're destroying my career here because the times are changing. Either it evolved away or they shut it down or whatever. And you're like, well, let's do something else. But if nothing else, you will know that your perseverance is in place. And as long as perseverance gets things done, which is sort of how I know the universe, I got the most fundamental quality that life can give me, which is push, 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 but only at my pace, So anyway, if you haven't been to deepthoughtsradio.com, please go. It's got everything up there. I won't tell you on this episode. Just go up. It's got everything. Just know there's a search field and categories. Know it's a variety show if it's your first time. For those of you who contribute through PayPal and Patreon, thank you so much. I think I finally got everyone's new names in there because, boy, a bunch of new people came on board. And I was like, oh my gosh, because I'll get a notice in my car and be like, oh man, I need to add that person to the credits. So if you've contributed and you're not in the credits, do let me know. Make sure to get up. If you're on Patreon, make sure you get up and get the fireside chats. There's 15 as of this recording. I got 16 in the can, so it'll probably be 16 by the time you get up there. And there's just some goodies up there. A few new ones. There's no tiers, so once you're in, you're in. Anyway, take care of yourself and someone else, and I'll see you in the next Deep Thoughts. Over now.